Welcome to the Edge of Liberty right here on the SHR Media Network. Simulcast with our good friends over at KLRN Radio. Thank you, Rick, for warming everybody up. It's a pleasure to be here. Chat rooms are just starting to wake up. Man, we have a lot to talk about. We're so close. It's 3 o'clock on the East Coast, 12 noon here on the West Coast. And there is just a ton going on. We figured there would be. We figured it would be chaos. It is, in fact, chaos. Not in a bad way. There's just so much going on right now. And the pandemonium, just in all the news agencies, is off the hook. I mean, I'm going to get to some of it today. Some of the things that they're saying and just trying to sell, it's just... Sometimes I think stuff like that's delicious, and then other times I'm just like, dude. Actually, this is probably what we need. We need to just blow it all out today. That way election day comes tomorrow and come Wednesday, everyone can calm down just a smidge, just a smidgen. And I'm not saying calm down because I'm tired or you know, I'm worn out. I'm not. It's just we have to start getting back to reality. All media right now, mainstream legacy media types, are just absolutely blowing this whole thing out of proportion. And it's the scare factor that they're going for. They're going for that petrified view of the world. And really, well, let's ask Uncle Joe what he thinks they should do.
But I'm serious. These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
Okay. All right. Probably not his best one there. As a matter of fact, that was Saturday. Because of that, Uncle Joe has been asked not to do anything, which is kind of funny because that came on the hinge of the edge of garbage debate, right? He called everyone garbage, and it led to the whole Trump in a garbage truck thing and all that. So then they took him off. They put him on the sideline for a little bit, and they gave him a chance to come back out. And that's what he says. He calls it, says, they all need to be smacked on the ass. He's talking about Trump supporters, by the way. So more joy and peace coming over at the Harris camp, specifically from Uncle Joe. I still, like I said, I'm still 50-50 on whether or not he's actually trying to help Kamala or hurt Kamala. I don't know which one it is with him. I know how Jill feels, but man, when you go out, it's just, I know we've talked about it, but man, he can't stop. I know he's a gaffe machine. He's been a gaffe machine his entire career. Saturday Night Live was in the news. So Saturday Night Live a couple weeks ago put out a statement. Hey, we're not going to have either one of the candidates on. We're not going to invite them on. We're just doing our thing, which, whatever. Good for you. You're Saturday Night Live. Hopefully you can find your way back to being what used to be a hysterical show. And they've had a couple funny bits here and there. It's not all been unfunny, but really there's not been a lot of great comedy on SNL. But they all of a sudden decided this past Saturday night they're going to have Vice President Harris on, which everybody kind of went, that's weird, because they just said they're not going to do it. The election's Tuesday, and the FCC Fair Equal Time Act, which essentially says if you're going to give one candidate this amount of time, you have to offer some time to the other candidate. Now, everybody freaked out, and they were like, well, Kamala, you never see her on Fox or Newsmax or Right Side and blah, 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 blah. How is that fair? Well, they just have to offer. That doesn't mean that the candidate has to take them up on it. It doesn't mean that at all. They just have to offer. And we saw what happened the last time when Kamala went on Fox. It didn't work out so good for her. That is the top of my computer screen you're seeing there. Interesting. So, yeah. So everyone was up in arms on the right saying, wait a minute, this isn't cool. You had one of the FCC commissioners come out and say, hey, this violates this act specifically. SNL has 5 million viewers on average. I believe they had 5 million viewers Saturday night is what they said. So the FCC told NBC, if you don't offer time, something could happen. Now, I think NBC took this as a calculated risk. They have lawyers. They're not stupid. And they said, well, we can get Kamala on, and then whatever they hit us with. We're willing to pay the fine, whatever. It's worth having Kamala Harris on the show for us to push an agenda, because NBC Universal has a leftist agenda. The entire world knows that. I'm not like breaking any major news. So I think they absolutely knew, hey, this is a calculated risk we're willing to take, and if we get slammed, we'll pay the fine. And then they got slammed hard. When you had an FCC commissioner come out the next morning, it was like 8 o'clock Sunday morning. They were like, hey, wait a second. So what they did is they agreed to give Trump time during Monday Night Football to make up for it. Now, that is 20 million. I believe it's 20 million viewers. And so what did Trump do? Trump released an ad. And Trump released a serious ad, a message to our sports fan, and took full advantage of it, and more people saw it. Now, do you really think in your heart of hearts, and I've seen this flown out on X, man, X, some people just, I know I probably say some bombastic things and things people agree about, but I try to think it through first. The people on X who are all of a sudden think NBC's in the bag for Trump, folks, there's been studies done that 80% of the coverage on Trump is negative, and like 60% of the coverage on Harris through legacy media has been positive. That's a pretty big difference. But it just goes to show you, I think they knew they were going to get hit harder than they probably thought, and that's why they jumped to it. So there's so many little stories I want to get to and so many little comments, and I am just going to be pulling a whole bunch of X posts this show. I lined it all up, but much like this election, I decided to just go off the rails with it and just pick out whatever things I want to do. Everyone knows the Diddy story. Everybody on X has also been pointing out that many of the people who are endorsing and speaking at events for Kamala Harris are alleged to be on the Diddy tapes at the freak-offs, right? J-Lo specifically, most recently, J-Lo, she's really good at picking people and things, and she really sticks hard to whatever she stays to for about 6 months at a time when it comes to picking a person. Neither here nor there. But this weekend, Danica Patrick, the former NASCAR driver, she's been with Trump and supporting Trump and going to his speeches. She said, you literally get 6 presidents when you pick him. You get Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Bobby Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Elon Musk. Elon can't be president because of the law, but whatever. I'm not paid to be here. I don't have a teleprompter. I don't need a telephone. That was a knock on Cardi B, who had to use somebody else's phone that she read through her whole speech the other night. And I never went to a Diddy party. So the gloves are kind of off. I mean, they've been off, and I get they've been off, but they've been off so much more recently. And I know there's already one person in the chat room who brought up Peanut. I'll get to Peanut. I promise I'll get to Peanut. But it's just amazing to see what's being said now and what's being called out publicly. Because look, everyone on X and beyond X has been saying, why is she having all these people who are allegedly tied to Diddy when we don't know what's on those Diddy tapes that are supposed to be coming out? And this probably isn't a good look for her. But the tapes come out after the election, and then she has deniability. I didn't know they came out after the election, or at least what we'll know of the tapes. So it's just delicious. It's so fun. If you're a political nerd like I am, this is actually enjoyable. It gets goofy, it gets crazy, but it's also enjoyable because you see stuff coming. You know, if you watch these polls, if you watch elections, if you pay close attention, and you know, I've been doing this pretty much for 12 years or so. So this is my third election where I'm really dialed. I've always followed politics and everything, but dialed for the sake of a show and for the sake of the network. And to see things that you called a couple weeks ago, that there's going to be some outlandish polls coming out. Some polls will tighten and start to, the more serious national polls will start to tighten and show it more true depiction. As I said before, you don't listen to polls. Even today, don't listen to polls. Tomorrow, the polls are going to be as close as they're probably going to get. Most of them. You have a few who are consistent and good, but most of them will tighten up, and they have been tightening up closer to reality. They start sampling a little bit more realistically, et cetera, et cetera. But yesterday, Seltzer, you know who Seltzer is? She does polls. Released this outlandish poll that was Harris was up like 4 points or 3 points in Iowa. And everybody said, wait a minute, hold up. She has been polling 10 points down in Iowa this entire time from Trump. This entire time. And the left ran with that. Man, I mean, it was like they were charging for a touchdown. Haha, we got what we wanted. And then they're just streaming down the field. And you know how media works because you saw that poll on all the networks were talking about it. All the talking head liberals were talking about it. They were doing everything they could to boost this up. Why? As we saw in 22, we saw in other times, part of their plan is to make conservative voters feel like they should just stay home. Either red wave, oh my God, you're doing so good, you don't have to get off the couch, Gary. Everyone who pays attention will get that reference. Or you're losing so badly your vote don't count. And they're running with that. We're winning so much in Iowa, don't even bother showing up. But what they ignored, as they do, is the Emerson poll. And the Emerson poll that came out at the exact same time had Trump up 10 points. So this is when I tell you there are some pollsters out there that are just garbage. And they do it. It's propaganda. They are trying to move a needle in their direction, one way or the other. However they present those numbers up or down, because they can't be consistently that bad, right? And then another poll just came out today. Emerson again, Ohio poll, Trump 54, Harris 42. In the Senate, Moreno 48, Brown 45. So if you're wondering about the Ohio poll, I just saw that and I figured I'm talking about polls. I might as well throw it out. But here is a poll that you're going to see this whole time. You've heard of, I believe it's pronounced Mudang, right? Am I pronouncing that right? Mudang, the baby mini hippo, right? She made her choice, and now I think there's finally a poll that I think we can finally latch into. And here's Mudang's choice. One says Trump, one says Harris. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, was the Trump cake that she ate. So now that we know who Mudang is choosing, we can pretty much, it sums it up. I mean, why even show up tomorrow? Well, you're going to show up tomorrow because you're going to catch the media, the coverage of the election right here on SHR Media. We will be associating and broadcasting with our good friends over at KLRN. We start at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. on the East Coast tomorrow night. But tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. on the East Coast, Jersey Joe, BZ, and I will have our Get Out the Vote special. To our special, we will be joined by KLRN's own Rick Robinson. We'll be glad to have him. I think it's his first real appearance over at SHR Media through the years, which is kind of crazy, considering we have done a lot of time together over the years. So it's nice to have Rick on. And I'm going to send you, I know Halloween's over. Before we go to break, because break's 3 minutes out. Before Halloween's over, I'm going to show you this. Look, I'm sorry about the jump scare. And this is going to be a jump scare, but I feel like you need to watch this.
You could conceivably be a great AG if this was... Because, and I say this because your moral core is magnificent. Well, and I know you probably don't want it, you don't want to think about it, but I just feel like I would feel a lot better with you leading the FBI, the CIA, the NBC, the
Holy...
That's just me. So I'm just saying, should it be floated? Please think about it.
And under the radar, we have to get.
Could you imagine? Director of CIA, Liz Cheney, do you know the amount of shit that we would be blowing up? Pardon my French. I know it's afternoon. That we would be absolutely invading and blowing up in countries that would be overthrown in a matter of weeks. She is a war hawk. You know, the big controversy over the weekend in one of the Trump speeches was they tried to say he called for her to be in front of a firing squad. What he said in essence, and I know I talked about this, but he said in essence, like, no, I don't know. If she wants to send people to war, why did she go first and see her on the battlefield and how she feels with 9 barrels pointed at her? Because she's a war hawk, just like her dad. The fruit don't fall far from the tree. And just like her dad, I would not trust her aim or go hunting with her. And I certainly wouldn't put her in charge of the CIA, who has a huge paramilitary element. And we all know what the CIA does, right, wrong, or indifferent. Can you imagine Liz Cheney? CIA, Liz Cheney. Oh, it scared the bejesus out of me. And it also is probably the deal that she made. She's not over there helping Harris because she is some moral person that Whoopi said, not Oprah. I'm going to talk about Oprah in a little bit because she's talking tomorrow. She's not this moral individual. She's a war hawk. She's a politician. She's just like her dad. She wants to make all the money when she sends our people off to war. And how do you start wars? Well, CIA has a tendency to be involved in a lot of that. Look at Libya. If you saw 13 Hours in Benghazi or read the book, that all started because the CIA encouraged and helped Muammar Gaddafi get killed. Liked or disliked Muammar Gaddafi, we shouldn't have been there. And Liz Cheney will be no different than Hillary Rodham Clinton. Remember, Hillary sold a bunch of uranium 1. Look it up yourself. We're up against the break. When we come back, we're just going to keep going with all of these articles that I have to talk about right here on the SHR Media Network with our good friends over at KLRN. If you're listening and liking, and please subscribe, share, help us with the algorithms, especially on YouTube, man. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and share. The YouTube algorithm kills us. Facebook as well. Be right back with the Edge of Liberty.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Welcome to River of Common Sense, where we cut through the noise of news and politics with a sharp wit and clear discussion. Tune in every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a refreshing dose of reality as we fearlessly tackle the tough topics with no nonsense, just pure common sense. Visit shrmedia.com to discover where you can catch River of Common Sense in action. He's here to amplify your inner logic. He may not always be polite, he may not always be refined, but one thing's for sure, he always tells it like it is.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Welcome back. Election Eve, SHR Media. This is the Edge of Liberty. I am Sean, your host. I'm sorry I look like this. Nothing I can do about it. Thank you for everyone who's watching. If you're in the chat rooms, feel free to say hi. I might answer, I might not. It's hard to tell sometimes with me. So this is a interesting article. This is from the New York Times. This is from the New York Post, talking about the New York Times admitted that maybe the woke ideology peaked and is starting to die off. If you go read the story at the Times or at the Post, whichever one you want. A reporter for the newspaper said the story titled, "In Shift from 2020, Identity Politics is Losing Its Grip on the Country." Well, wouldn't that just be fantastic? How many of us have been saying for how long that identity politics and the woke aspect of our lives is absolutely destructive? Absolutely destructive. You know how many families have been chewed apart by identity politics and the woke agenda? The woke agenda is specifically. Speaking of families being ripped apart, over the weekend, we got word that Wednesday, the New York Department of Environmental Conservation Law Enforcement conducted a raid on the home of Peanut, the TikTok and Instagram squirrel. And it may seem silly that they conducted this raid because of a single complaint from the internet. They said they got multiples, and it looks like it might have been multiples from the same person, which, because, you know, if you spend your time angry that somebody has a squirrel living in their house, that you complain numerous times, I'm not even saying get a life, because that's way far down on your list of things to accomplish. But you need to start rethinking your priorities in life. Why? And first of all, the story is, and I didn't know, I'll be first to admit, I'd seen Peanut once or twice in little videos online. It's not my thing. I don't really watch stuff like that. But as I have started to learn about Peanut, he was rescued at what they believe to be 2 weeks old after his mother got run over by the car. The guy who rescued him also has a animal rescue. He was also being kept with another rescued animal, a raccoon by the name of Fred, who is also adorable. Well, during that raid on their home, which, by the way, if you're in New York You telling me you ain't got bigger problems than a squirrel living in somebody's house? I don't care if you're the Department of Environmental Conservation. The amount of poaching alone that goes in every state, this has to be so far down on your priority list. Why? Why? When we talk about big government and we talk about government overreach, this, and I can tell you from the response on social media, this pisses people off. They weren't hurting anybody. It wasn't like he was bringing in random people from the street and putting peanut on the person and he was biting people left and right. He wasn't creating a dangerous situation. Well, during the raid, one of the investigators was handling Peanut the squirrel and allegedly it bit him. So then they seized Fred and Peanut, euthanized both of them to test them for rabies. I just want you to just think about that for a second. Now, that might be standard protocol after a dog bite, and I understand that. However, do you really think that that investigator was handling that squirrel gently? I doubt it. It's speculation. That's pure speculation. But it's also an animal whose home you just raided. It's very attached to this person and the family. And now you're handling it. Why were you even handling it? Unless it was like attacking you. If it was in its little house, why were you handling it? But the question, one of the first things that they teach you in law enforcement, there's a million first things, but one of the things they teach you is ask yourself, should I even be here right now when you're law enforcement legally? Do I have the right to be here? Should I be here? And then you start getting into spirit of the law, letter of the law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they took Peanut and Fred, they euthanized them to test for rabies after getting bit for a situation that they created. Now, the animals lived in the house for 7 years. I don't know if it's had a rabies vaccination before or not. But what I can tell you is it hasn't shown that it's had rabies in 7 years, and it's been contained for 7 years. I could be wrong, but that's what everything is showing right now. People are angry. And I see people, and Jennifer Rubin put out a X post that she took back down saying, the MAGA squirrel should have died. It wasn't even a MAGA squirrel. I don't know the owner's politics at all. Not a lot of people did. As a matter of fact, there's allegations right now. Well, not allegations, but it's coming to light that he's on OnlyFans and maybe a maker of OnlyFans. It's not the point. The point is, this is a tremendous government overreach. And I have to take a break. I will be back. I apologize.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Welcome to Reaver of Common Sense, where we cut through the noise of news and politics with a sharp wit and clear discussion. Tune in every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a refreshing dose of reality as we fearlessly tackle the tough topics with no nonsense, just pure common sense. Visit shrmedia.com to discover where you can catch Reaver of Common Sense in action. He's here to amplify your inner logic. He may not always be polite, he may not always be refined, but one thing's for sure, he always tells it like it is.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Edge of Liberty. My apologies. Sometimes things just happen. So that's a story of Peanut the Squirrel. I talked about it before the break. It's tragic. I think it's a huge government overreach. I don't think that is what should have been done in that situation. I feel like it could have been handled by a phone call or a meeting and not a 6-person raid where you held the owner in handcuffs and then he couldn't care for his other animals. I'm sure time will tell what's going to happen there. So we talk about election fraud. And by the way, anytime you bring up election fraud, people say, oh, it didn't happen. It never happened. And the left absolutely loses their mind when you bring up election fraud. And it's funny because election frauds happened a bunch. So much so, the Heritage Foundation has a link or has a page on their website where you can go through and look at all the cases, legal cases, not Heritage Foundation cases, legal cases of election fraud. And it even gives dispositions on the cases, what the fraud was, where it was, and you look, Texas, 111 cases, Minnesota, 138 cases, Illinois, 116, North Carolina, 123, Florida, California, 64, Arizona, 38. And it's so funny when you bring this up to people and they say, oh, but election fraud didn't happen. Really? Because Minnesota had 138 cases. Minnesota's a pretty key state. Wisconsin, another one, 68. Ohio, 63. I can go on and on and on. And then we get to Colorado. Colorado, according to the database, had 19 cases of election fraud over the last couple of years, going back to the last presidential election. And you have the Attorney General who tried to keep Trump off the ballot. Remember her? What a peach she was, huh? Just a regular sweetheart. She tried to keep Trump off the ballot. That didn't work. Maine tried to follow suit. That didn't work. Of course, the Supreme Court said, you can't do that, you moron. However, this shows you who she is, right? You start to build a background on a character based on their activities because that's how you're supposed to judge people. So that's one of her activities. She swore Trump was never going to be on the ballot. So this already kicks into that she's just like Letitia James and Bragg and all those other ones. She had an angle going in. So what does she do? Well, she blames it on somebody else, but the passwords for the the voting machines have been online with the BIOS keys. And they were online not for like an hour. Apparently they were online for a few weeks before somebody realized it and took them down. Think about that for a second. How could that when you are trying to combat the idea that there's no election fraud and then and she's responsible for it. That's the other thing. She's responsible for it because she's the Secretary of State. Sorry, I said AG, Secretary of State. It's her office. So even if it was an employee that did it, she's still responsible for it. No different than any other office where something happens and they're like, well, you have to blame. Yeah, you got to blame her. And people are like, oh, she should be prosecuted by it. I got lit up on one of the speeches because I said she needs to resign immediately. I said this Sunday in one of my posts, and somebody said, oh, she needs to be prosecuted. I'm like, yeah, it's all down the road, but right now she's still in charge. And you're not going to have an investigation that's going to lead to her being prosecuted or recalled before Tuesday. because now you got to ask yourself who has those passwords, and maybe they can reset them. I am not an expert in the machines. I don't claim to be. But how long would those have stayed online if it didn't get talked about in the media? And I don't see it on any major media outlets. I know it's been, Fox has covered it, but it hasn't got, this is a big deal going into an election. It's a huge deal. And I know I have a comment out of the chat I just put up, said everyone has an angle. The leftists just seem to have a lot of them that people don't agree with. Yeah, I agree with that. You know, I say it all the time. I'm a commentator. I commentate. I have my angle. I'm a conservative. I'll be the first one to admit it. And I don't push back on that. The news is supposed to be news and report it. But they don't. They absolutely don't. And Life's Lesson actually I love this quote. Actually, thank you. Life's Lesson in the chat room. People who are responsible for things never seem to take responsibility like Nancy Pelosi. Why is she still doing anything in politics? I don't know. But it's not just them. And I get they're on both sides. People that have these really horrible, stupid, and sometimes controversial mistakes, and they don't take responsibility for it. I understand that happens on both sides. But when you know that election interference and election fraud is still fresh on people's mind, and I showed you the Heritage website that shows you all of the cases, it's not imaginary. It's not imaginary. And it's something that you have to combat against. Look, I hate to see that confidence in our elections is drastically hurt. But there's a cause for that. Conservatives didn't just wake up and say, hey, there's some issues we're having here, or I'm going to make them up. No. We had the water leak. You have the ballot spike at 2 a.m. You have a lot of different things. Them putting up papers and keeping the auditors out, right? That was just 4 years ago. So you know there are things, there are reasons, plus all the criminal cases that have been brought. It is something that if you are trying to regain confidence in our electoral system, you need to be spot on with it. And if you make a mistake, you got to own it. You can't say, well, it was somebody in my office. No, my office did this. My office made a mistake. This is how we will fix it. That's what they should be doing. But she gave out the whole, well, it was somebody. And when you're trying to unify a country, and I think we need to unify. I have my differences with the left. I have friends who are on the left. I have my issues. That doesn't mean that I don't think there's some common ground with a majority of the people. Maybe not a lot of common ground, but some common ground, right? Let's be realistic. And then when you're looking to unify, and like I said, I hope after the election tomorrow that the temperature does come down. I don't think it will when it comes to the nerds like me who and I'm, I try not to get too over the top. I mean, and I do at times. I'll be the first to admit it. But I think there are so many other people that are going to keep that rhetoric up more so than I'm going to. I want to work. I want this country to be successful. And I said this under Biden. I did not vote for Biden, but I wanted him to be successful. Why? Because then the nation's successful. And my version of success might be different than others, but that's how I view it. I didn't want him to fail because then the nation fails. I don't cut off my nose to spite my face. Now, do I think he did a good job? No, I really don't. I think there's a lot of things that I can point at and say, oh man, the man didn't do a good job. And was he hidden and everybody knew that he was in mental decline? Yes, I think that's a very obvious thing too. But that doesn't mean that me as an individual hoping that the office is successful for the nation is the same as supporting a Joe Biden. I can separate the two. I'm a grown up. I can say I want the country to be successful, but I don't like this politician. And in the chat room, Life Lesson again was just talking about the emotions on the left and how they, and I've said this for years, and I agree with this. On the left, the emotion is the argument, and they try to drizzle in some facts here and there. On the right, more often than not, we try to use logic as the basis of our argument and support it with emotional. Like when I get loud and everything, it's not that I'm emotional and then I'm drizzling in a couple of facts here and there. No. I try to keep my arguments based in logic and fact and use my emotions to bolster it. I want to unify this country. I really do. And I'm not saying I want to capitulate and I want to give away. No. But what I want is for people to be able to talk again and not be absolutely insane. I'm not the only one, and I'm not claiming to be a victim because it doesn't hurt my feelings. I'm using this to prove a point. Do you know the amount of death threats that I get through direct messages? And I don't put them up because I don't like to give people that attention. I think it doesn't solve anything. That's just me personally. I don't care what other people do. Or like the insults that I get called. You know, when you come into my timeline and the first thing you start going after is the fact that I'm overweight, bald, and I'm old, dude, I beat you to that punch a long time ago. You ain't going to hurt my feelings. But if that's all you have, and if all you can say in an argument is, well, cry harder, cope, blah, 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 and you can't say, well, I understand what you're saying, but if you look at X, Y, and Z, you know, as I said a couple weeks ago in an article, I said, you know, truth, there's a difference between truth and fact. Truth is what everybody believes, right? Facts are facts. It's black and white. Truth, now, can those two paths cross? Yes. Can facts and truth cross? 100%, absolutely. But to a young kid, it's true that there's tooth fairy. Now, you can say, well, they're young, but it's true to them, right? That's how it works when it comes to truth. Facts are different. Facts are logic. Truths are emotional based in many different ways. And I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying you have to be able to form your arguments without the emotion and stick to facts when you're having a conversation about how this country will change, grow, and what direction we're going. Now, if you have all facts in place and you're using your emotions to really explain it and share it, great, go for it. But if your first act is to attack and then, I don't know, what's a good attack? Calling half the country's Nazis. Calling half the country's garbage, deplorables, etc., etc., etc. Right? And then they wonder why she's struggling right now. Her polls are struggling right now internally. And you can tell by the rhetoric that they're throwing out externally. And that's one of the things is because they've spent more time going after the people who support Trump versus Trump's policies. And I'm not the only one saying this. If you follow Scott Jennings used to work for Bush. He's one of the only conservatives allowed to talk on CNN. But he gave this, and I'm going to play this in its entirety because I'm not going to take my next break because I caught one early that I wasn't expecting. But I want you to just see what he's saying and look at the reaction of all the leftists sitting around. Hold on.
Handful of hours to go. I mean, she doesn't have to attack Donald Trump, I guess, because she's done it every single day of the campaign since she got into it. It's been a relentlessly negative and relentlessly dishonest campaign. And here at the end, they want credit for trying to be positive and unifying after a week of Republicans are Nazis, Republicans are garbage, Republican women are weak and stupid. So I get it. I understand why they would want to tout this one time that she didn't relentlessly go negative and dishonest against Donald Trump. But to me, the bulk of the campaign is obvious. It is they're betting all their chips on there's just enough people in the country who hate or are willing to fear Donald Trump to win. That's about all they've got.
So wait,
and I think Kamala Harris has been frightfully vague about what she wants to do.
Who's been more negative, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump?
Harris, without question.
Oh, come on,
so really every day.
And I personally think it would be dishonest not to acknowledge that the bulk of the attacks that Kamala Harris lodges against Donald Trump range from basically dishonest to absolutely, I can't believe they're getting away with this, dishonest on policy, on all sorts of things. And I feel like this goes unacknowledged because of how Trump operates. And I fully admit that he says things that get our attention and that sound outrageous
and incredibly
but we don't hold her to the same level of accountability. And the bulk of their campaign against Trump has been she sits on a throne of dishonesty when it comes to his agenda. He did not write Project 2025. He did not put it in a book. He does not hand it out. And that is the bulk of their campaign. And it's ridiculous. What I decided to do in this election was focus on the future. Who do I think would take the country and the government in the basic direction in which I want to go? But most of the time, a government that he would build would probably do most of what I want. And I think none of the time that's true for Harris. She's given Republicans like me, who don't really come from the MAGA wing of the party, absolutely nothing. And just to put a point on what I said earlier, the headline that I woke up to this morning in Axios was "The no comment candidate, Harris' strategy clouds how she'd govern. She doesn't want voters to know whether she would stick to her old liberal views or govern with new centrist thinking. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. How can I entrust my vote with someone who won't even tell me whether they have a conservative view?"
That is so dishonest.
See how everything's dishonest that they disagree with? And they're not saying why it's dishonest. They just jump right to, oh, that's dishonest. Right? And Scott Jennings, like I said, he's no MAGA guy. Scott's not I can guarantee you I'm probably further right than him on a lot of issues. But did you watch how they just lashed and attacked, right? And they're attacking what's being reported versus, and essentially what he said is Kamala Harris has not done a lot of telling you how she is going to govern. She's flip-flopped on a bunch of things. Right? First, she was for fracking, not for fracking, then for fracking again. Immigration's the same thing. She's gone back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I covered this in a show a couple weeks ago why she does it. But the simple fact of the matter is, when they push her, what does she do? But Trump, but Trump, but Trump, but Trump. And then her surrogates go out and attack Trump supporters. Mark Cuban, I talked about it a couple days ago. Trump doesn't surround himself. He's never surrounded himself with any strong and intelligent women. Okay, really? You're going to say something like that when you know that's going to cause backlash. You know it. And you know it's not true. Just because you don't agree with the women who surround Trump doesn't mean they're unintelligent, and it doesn't mean they're weak. The two don't jive. And the same thing goes for people around Biden or for around Harris. As a matter of fact, I think one of the things that I say a lot is you have to realize how intelligent they are and how they use that. I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to agree with what they're doing, but that doesn't make them unintelligent. Harris, as I said before, her biggest problem is she's always been who other people have told her to do, and she doesn't have any ideas of her own now. And then when she gets pressed on issues, she gets angry, she pivots to Trump, and she deflects. I don't know which version of Kamala Harris is real, and I don't think anybody does. Like I said before, she was created in the liberal lab in California, where she was cultivated to be a politician. Her whole career, people have told her how to act and how to say and what to say and when to say it. And now that she is the boss of her campaign, it's not going well. This weekend, and actually CNN reported this, depending on where you were living, in Michigan, she was running pro-Palestinian ads. When she was on her ads in Pennsylvania, it was pro-Israel ads. At the same time, CNN reported it. It's on CNN's website. She's running to whomever. I mean, that in itself shows you that she can't decide who she's for or against. She's hurting with Muslims in Michigan. We know that. She's hurting in Pennsylvania in general. But when you send out what are they, 2.5 states away? Depending, doesn't Wisconsin like cut them in half for Michigan? Or maybe it's Michigan. But my point is, how can you run both sides? How can you stand on both sides of the street at the same time? And consider yourself not to flip-flop constantly. And this is one of the reasons I think Shapiro, and I stand by the fact, I think Shapiro turned her down. I know a lot of people said that she didn't pick him because it would hurt her with Palestinians and Palestinian supporters because he's Jewish. But I think he turned her down because he has a political future he's concerned about, and because it would hurt him with Jewish voters, because she's been very pro-Palestinian. Here's another report out of the House Judiciary GOP. And I know, Foreman says, well, it's a House Judiciary GOP. Okay. Right. I understand where it's from. But inside Kamala Harris's Open Borders Alliance with the UN, U.S. tax dollars were spent on foreign nationals' salaries so they could advise other foreign nationals on the easiest way to migrate to the United States. U.S. tax dollars were spent on foreign nationals' salaries so they could advise other foreign nationals on the easiest way to enter the country illegally. At least 81.7 million taxpayer dollars spent by the Open Borders United Nations to allow illegal immigrants to bypass the southwest border and fly directly into the United States. Migrant centers set up through Central and South America staffed with UN bureaucrats. Nearly 70,000 aliens referred for potential resettlement in the United States from those offices. 81 million of our dollars. We're already spending a ton of money on the illegals because of the open borders. And they spent another 81 million on it to get them here. You know, when we start talking about the Great Replacement theory and how they always push back, oh, that's not what's happening. You just hate illegals and blah, blah. You don't like any immigrants. No. I don't want open borders. And we know why the Democrats want open borders, because the potential of those coming in through those open borders, if they get amnesty like the Democrats want, and if they get citizenship like the Democrats want, even though they entered the country illegally and didn't wait in line like all of the other immigrants that come here the right way have to do, they know the odds of them being potential voters is pretty high. They also know that it's going to lead to redistricting for the House of Representatives, because the census does not ask if you were a citizen or not. They just take the numbers, and that's how your districts are made for the House of Representatives. They move and redistrict lines based on that population. So it's already going to change how this country votes. And then when you tell me that we spend 81 million to import illegals, it's really hard to prove that that is not your plan. Now, speaking of immigrants who came the right way, if you don't know who Lily Tang Williams is, Lily Tang Williams is running for the New Hampshire GOP seat, New Hampshire 2. She has been friends of SHR Media going back to 2015, I think, is the first time BZ interviewed her when we were at Freedom Fest. I think it was 15 or 16. She is a legal Chinese immigrant who grew up under Mao, who grew up under communism, and despises all of it and has been vocal about it for years. She has run for other seats before, but this time she's running against a woman called Maggie Goodlander for the New Hampshire 2 seat. Who is Maggie Goodlander? Well, Maggie Goodlander does not even live in the District 2. She rents an apartment there. Her actual home is in Portsmouth, a different district, and it's a $20 million home. Her husband, by the way, is Jake Sullivan, who works for Biden. You know Jake Sullivan. Now, they had a debate the other night, and a little bit of backstory. Goodlander's getting all of this Democrat money. Why? Because her husband works one-on-one with the president every day. He's tied into the DNC huge, so they're flooding this. She's a carpetbagger, and they're flooding it. And Lily Tang Williams, as BZ just said in the chat room, she actually may win this. And it's because of moments like this is the reason that she wins, because she's authentic. And as we've seen with this election, authenticity goes a long way.
You are wealthy. You're worth $20 million to $30 million. How do you know about regular people suffering? Do you go shopping, go to Walmart, buy food, and talk to those people? And you pretend to be Ranger in Nashua a few months ago, move back to run for this open seat with millions of dollars from Washington, D.C. insiders. And the millions of dollars. I don't have money to run a TV ad. And you pretend you are poor, complain rent is so high. You couldn't save that apartment for other people to rent in Nashua. Just go back to your $2 million home in Portsmouth. Please don't say that, because you do not understand regular people.
Lily Tang Williams is that person all the time. She's one of the sweetest people you can meet, but she's been a firebrand for as long as I can remember. And I know BZ's in the chat and he'll agree. She's passionate. She is a passionate conservative. She's a passionate American. She sees what communism did to her country, and she despises it. And now she's dealing with Maggie Goodlander. I said $20 million home. It's a $2 million home. Oh, by the way, I didn't realize somebody was putting up those word bubbles on this. I had 2 or 3 of these saved, so I apologize. Kind of funny. Whatever, I'm a commentator. But yeah, Goodlander's worth $20 million. Lily Tang Williams is not. She is a salt of the earth grassroots movement. And there's a chance she's going to pull it off. If she pulls off that seat, this will tell you that the direction in this country's changed. Look, Nashua is pretty blue. New Hampshire is pretty blue because of all the massholes, former masshole, that moved up there and started doing the same thing that they did in Massachusetts. They voted for all of the Democrat Massachusetts progressive ways. And now it seems like people up there are starting to get a hang of it. A couple of funny things before I go. Of course, the Babylon Bee is one of my favorites. They put this up earlier today. Make that nice and big for you. Democrats warn that if Trump is elected, it will be the end of bureaucracy as we know it. So, you know, you don't follow the Babylon Bee. You know, it's funny. I have a friend of mine who's a Democrat, not a progressive, a little more old school blue dog Democrat, who's absolutely loves the Babylon Bee, because he even said, he's like, they're just funny. Like, they just get it right. They're just funny. Let's see, how much time do I have? I don't have a lot of time left. Oh, but this tells you where the campaign is for Kamala right now. I will play this really quick before I go.
Maybe you're Muslim American or Jewish American, and you are heartbroken and furious about the ongoing bloodshed in the Middle East, and worried about the rise of anti-Semitism. Why would you place your faith in somebody who instituted a so-called Muslim ban, who sat down for pleasantries with Holocaust deniers, who said that there were very fine people on both sides of a white supremacist rally?
The very fine people routine has been disproven 45 bazillion times, and all the other stuff, the so-called Muslim ban, all of that stuff, way out of context, and he knows it. But this is where they're at. They're going back to the very fine people hoax, because they're scared. There are reports that their meeting yesterday morning was very somber, with the campaign head saying, you may want to hold on tight for Tuesday. Don't start changing your business cards yet. Folks, that's it for me. Hey, before I go, earlier today I got news that a friend of mine, haven't kept close touch over the years, but it was still a friend that I worked with for many years, had passed away. And I wish he and his family, I'm not going to say a name because it isn't public yet, but I wish his family the best. And it's also a reminder to check on people. Some people, they smile through a lot of pain and they don't talk about it, and they need to be checked on. So please do that. Tonight, we do have the pre-election Get Out and Vote special. As I've talked about, I know I'm running a little late. I apologize. I'll be with BZ, Jersey Joe, and Rick from KLRN, Rick Robinson. And then all day tomorrow, starting at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 on the East Coast, right here on SHR Media, we will have election coverage all through the night. So stick around. No, not stick around. Come back and join us. Or stick around. If you want to stick around, look, who am I to tell you what to do, really? But if you want to stick around, that's great. If not, join us tonight. Join us tomorrow night. I am your host. Please, wherever you're watching from, like and subscribe. Help us out. Thank you so much to everybody who chatted in the chat room and all my friends on X. You want to follow me at the number 2 Against Tyranny, and I'll see you in a few hours.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Sean from the Edge of Liberty. Join me right here on the SHR Media Network every Monday and Friday, 12 on the Pacific, 3 on the East Coast. On this show, we'll discuss news, politics, the government, how cranky we are about the government, and more. If you want to hear hard talk, good interviews, sarcasm, bad jokes, and oh God, that really is me in a nutshell. Either way, check me out right here on the Edge of Liberty every Monday and Friday, 12 Pacific, 3 on the East, on the SHR Media Network.